Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, people's fondle slab of choice, I don't know when that was, doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't, it's hard to get real these days. Because seriously, they don't want you to have to freeze two sources whenever I try to prove out one of these things. It's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to be sadly disappointed on another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man, huh?
Really? You can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions? Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2. Within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America, we bring you the Ochelli Effect.
It's like, damn sure, no, I'm an original. We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for...
That's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
Hey, look at that. It is the 3rd of March, 2015, the Ochelli Effect. I'm your host, Chuck Ochelli. Normally, on Tuesday nights. Normally on Tuesday nights, I do the Liberty Beacon thing. We're canceling that for tonight. Things just come together and fall apart as they do and as they will. But anyway... The reason for that, of course, is that Roger Landry is actually a bit under the weather today. Didn't have enough of a voice to do his usual rant. But I do advise everybody to go ahead and check out the Liberty Beacon, alloneword.com. And I'm telling you, you'll find lots of great information there. But tonight instead, I've got the return of one of the guests that seems to cause lots of discussion, at least privately. So that's not too noisy there. At least privately, in messages and things. Can't get too many phone callers when this guy is on, though. We did have some the one time, but I'd really appreciate it if you guys wanted to join in this time. 718-717-8296. Frank Gregory Ford, who we discussed many times the issue of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We discussed the issue of torture. We've discussed the fact that... he personally knows that the alleged head of the alleged terrorist organization, the alleged ISIS, as it were, is somebody that he was extremely familiar with because he had recruited him as an asset. What a surprise. Don't we seem to keep recruiting these people as assets? Doesn't that happen? I was having a really fascinating discussion earlier, too, while I wait for Mr. Ford to join me. I was having a kind of a fascinating discussion with somebody else off air. Let's see if I can get to it here. Oh, where are ya? Of course, everything is going to run like mud. Gotta love it. Rebecca Roth, actually, was somebody that I was having a discussion with off the air, and she's going to be an upcoming guest on this show. Couple other notes just for the listeners out there. And by the way, thanks a lot for tuning in at ucy.tv/TOE, or if you're using your fondle slab of choice, whatever application it is you're using to listen to us, or if you're checking this out further down the line or on YouTube or wherever, I do thank you for even bothering to give me the time. But the thing is, a couple of other guests are going to come up during this month, and I'm working on some others that I don't want to reveal, but a couple of reoccurring ones like Maria Heller. And let's just take a look at my list of paper here, because my list on paper. Some new ones, though, like Bob Levy will be on with me. You guys will have fun with that, I guarantee you. Daniel Lewis Crumpton, a recurring guest. Maria Heller, a recurring guest, of course. Yes, and with any luck, Rebecca Roth. And you'll be kind of surprised what she has to say. Suzanne Posel will also join me at some point this month. You guys will have to stay tuned. Oh, no, wait. She's actually scheduled for Thursday. I'm sure the chat room is not happy, but I don't have you guys in front of me at the moment. Oh, boy, oh, boy. Anyway. So, let's see if we can get something working properly here. That would be nice. Is it going to come up or not? Well, as I said, hopefully the phones are working. 718-717-8296. If you don't want to join in that way and you happen to have me on your Skype list, you can also drop in that way. Still waiting for Mr. Ford. Hopefully he's not having trouble connecting, and that means that I have to try and call him out, and that's always a pain in the neck while I do that on the air. But let's get to a couple of the other interesting points of the day while we're waiting. Let's see now. Okay. This I found fascinating, even though it is in a mainstream rag. Ex-CIA Chief Petraeus pleads guilty to classified materials mishandling. Wow. So the man who authored The Surge in Iraq, after getting hit by the whole, his mistress might have had too much access to too many things, situation, that little house cleaning effort that they did sometime back there. Let's see. Right. David Petraeus, the former CIA director, and this is actually from Newsweek, believe it or not. David Petraeus, the former CIA director, has pled guilty to mishandling classified information according to reports by ABC News and the Associated Press. With this plea deal, he will avoid going to trial over the charge. The Justice Department issued this statement on the matter. Gotta love this when you get into these kind of statements. Okay, let's just see. We have, three documents, a criminal information, a plea agreement, and a statement of facts were filed today in the United States District Court for the Western District of North Carolina's Charlotte Division in the case of United States versus David Howell Petraeus. The criminal information charges the defendant one count of unauthorized removal and retention of classified material. The plea agreement and corresponding statement of facts, both signed by the defendant, indicate that he will plead guilty to the one-count criminal information. Okay, the classified information in question is materials Petraeus gave to Paula Broadwell, his biographer. I like that, his biographer. When she was interviewing him, Broadwell and Petraeus had an affair, which he admitted to in 2012, though he is still married. An FBI investigation uncovered the affair. Okay. The affair and who she is and who she was and whatever she was ostensibly writing is kind of irrelevant, but interesting to me that this is occurring now. Oh, boy, oh, boy. Oh, and now we do have Frank Gregory Ford with me. I'm sure he'll have something to say about Mr. Petraeus. So, and this whole, like I say, housekeeping kind of maneuver that's been conducted by the agency. So, how you doing tonight?
I'm great, Chuck. By the way, I want you to know that I got out of my hot tub and I was sitting there by the ocean, watching whales go by, okay, a pod of whales. So that's how devoted I am to getting on your show, okay, and getting the word out. Okay, by the way, they here in Northern California, when a group of humpback whales goes by, they call those a podcast, okay? Get it?
I like it.
So, anyway, when you mentioned earlier that David Petraeus, General Petraeus, was getting booked for all this bad behavior, this nefarious behavior. I seem to remember something about, what was it, a year and a half ago, getting all kinds of input from my folks in the intelligence field, and they said, gee, imagine that. All that pillow talk, okay, and where did it all go? Broadwell, okay, I forget her first name, the runner, okay, the hard body, she seemed to have had access to Mr. or General Petraeus' CHIM system, okay, that was a combined human intelligence management system. It looks like a cut-down version of a titanium encased version of a Apple computer, and that system has to be with the general, 828. Okay, he just happened to be the director of the Central Intelligence Agency when all this was going on, and there was, and when this happened, everybody was saying, look, on that system, there was direct information concerning what happened in Libya, okay, at the ambassador's residence that was supposedly attacked by Al Qaeda, and so everybody was looking for that evidence, looking for that information on the CHIM system, and it turns out that I think her first name was Paula Broadwell, right? Correct? Paula Broadwell, is that it? Was her first name? She had it, okay. Now, Mr. or General Petraeus, he was not an intelligence officer, okay, and I guess you could say he just simply didn't understand, what's called custodial care of highly classified documents. I mean, most people that haven't been in the intelligence business wouldn't understand that something as complex and detailed as keeping custody of extremely sensitive documents like that and information like that.
Well, right, because here's the thing that a lot of people misunderstand, because when we finally do see these things, they've been declassified, they've been through a whole process before they ever, end up somewhere deposited in the National Archives or in the archives too. Either way.
That's correct.
There's an entire process. We generally don't actually see the originals, and this is, of course, in the days when everything was still committed to paper. But see, nowadays, there's a lot of electronic components to this. And the custody of the documents, the ability to, you can't just sort of have these things out at your local coffee shop while you read them, this kind of thing.
Or on your pillow with your mistress.
Or up on your pillow with your mistress, right? You can't have your computers open, your keys around, or anything else around anybody else who isn't authorized to be in the same room with the same keys and documents and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of people do forget about that kind of stuff when it comes to this. Now, Petraeus, allegedly, wasn't an intelligence operative. He was actually a military general, right? I mean, this is the guy who authored the surge in Iraq. I found it rather odd when he was appointed to that position to begin with anyway, because, why is it that a military general, I can see the idea of taking an intelligence person and turning them into a military person. That makes sense, okay? But when you grab one of these guys, but then again, I'm a bit of a fool. I mean, after all, an oil man who had no exposure to the CIA, according to his own account, was selected as the head of the CIA in 1976 after having absolutely no experience with the CIA. I think his name was let me think here. Oh, Bush, right? So this leads me to believe that Petraeus, there's an undisclosed part of his biography here. Okay, now, and I'm not even talking about the part that only the mistress biographer got to see. I'm saying that there's probably more to it than we know. He had to have had some sort of experience, because he couldn't even possibly function as an administrator in the intelligence community at all, unless that was what the purpose was. Occasionally, somebody does get put in charge of the, of the CIA, who is there to basically fill a slot, to really just be a figurehead, while other people, his subordinates, sort of really actually run things. Sounds kind of like one of the presidencies we had in the 80s, but I don't know. Maybe I'm touching on too many subjects here, but you know what I'm saying. There's a lot more to this Petraeus mess than just, he made a mistake with some pillow talk. I mean, there's got to be, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, probably. It seems reasonable to assume that for your listeners, but the thing is that that's probably what it was. Me being in the human intelligence business and being an intelligence operative for a long time, most of my adult life, I have seen the disasters, literally the disasters that come about from, and I'm going to tell your listeners some more juicy tidbits also today concerning the D.C. man-up. All right, you think General Petraeus has a big mouth and can't keep anything from his mistress? You just wait till you see what's coming up. So,
well, yeah, there's got to be more. There's got to be more, and I'll tell you what. You did start a little bit of a private thing going back and forth regarding just you've mentioned her name on the one broadcast, and you were on the phone. You were on with a caller answering to him about it. And that's another rabbit hole that isn't just as simple as the salacious details that were sold to the American public either. Now, I didn't know her personally, but you actually did.
Yes, I did. But I was just going to continue with General Petraeus. He's not going to get off that easy. All right.
Good.
Now, okay. That whole situation concerning that information was the Libya issue, okay? It's still being investigated, and there's all kinds of conjecture going on about that being a possible setup. Again, as your listeners have heard me say many times, the supposition that, surprise, Al-Qaeda is our operative group. Has been, all right? And when they do things on a false flag basis. All right, I just reading something about ISIS today. Okay, it's beginning to look like ISIS has some real background questions that they need to answer. All right.
Oh, wait. Mr. Ford, you don't want to sound like one of these kooky conspiracy theorists like me now, do you? Because this is what I've been saying from day one when they started bringing this out about ISIS. And, of course, I was talking about this long before I had a radio show, but what did I say from the beginning? That, the Al-Qaeda is just that. This seems to be our construct. It seems to be what we're running, but we're just the crazy fringe people. Are you saying that it's actually seeming like they're sort of admitting it incrementally? I think you are.
Well, as coincidences. Period. There are none. All right. Everything is connected, some way, somehow. And I was just going over earlier. I was going over Scott Ritter's book, Target Iran. And if you want to see how these intelligence issues move back and forth with these control groups and these groups that they move around, to hot spots like Al Qaeda. Okay, that's a good example. And the Mujahideen al-Khalq, okay, from Iran. Okay, just take a look at Target Iran, written by Scott Ritter. Okay, when he wrote that book, they had to shut him up fast. So, surprise! Almost immediately, there's a fabricated sexual picadillo on the internet about Scott Ritter. Nobody's sharper. Nobody knows how the system works more than Scott Ritter. Okay, who was on the Weapons of Mass Destruction investigation team with Hans Blix, and all of a sudden, here's these airbrush photos of supposedly Scott Ritter misbehaving with an underage girl. Okay, well, that told me something right there. I better read what Scott Ritter has to say, and it was truly amazing. Okay, what the connection that he has made. Okay, and his weapons inspections for weapons of mass destruction. Okay, in Iran, in Iraq, and who sold those weapons, how those weapons were produced, how those weapons were transported, and what groups were behind it. Now, getting back to General Petraeus, my issues with General Petraeus happened way back Dreamtime when I was in Iraq in a city called Samarra. All right, your listeners probably know that by now. I was in Samarra. Yes, that is the hometown of ISIS, and the person who started ISIS was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and yes, he was my recruited asset in Samarra. Okay, well, something happened one morning about 3:00.
Hold on just a second. Hold on just a second, because you broke up a bit there, and I want to make very clear what you just said. See, this is what I was talking about at the very top of the show, folks, when I reminded you. Of course, if you've listened to Mr. Ford on my show before, you're well aware of the fact that the alleged head of the alleged terrorist group. Okay, I can't figure out another word to use there, Mr. Ford, but let's just keep going.
There's no alleged about it, Chuck.
Well, but here's the thing. Simply because they're presenting this in the media the way they are, it is our enemy's group and everything else. I still say that it stinks just like the Al-Qaeda did, right? It still stinks exactly the same way. It seems to have grown out of a natural situation combined with a controlled situation so that there's plenty of plausible deniability to go around. Look up that phrase. Okay, please do. Plausible deniability, in order to make sure that, we can stir up whatever it is somebody deems necessary in a region. That's exactly what happens. And this, what you say just offhand about the fact that you knew this guy who is now the head of that group because he was a recruited asset. Now, asset doesn't necessarily mean that this is somebody who agrees with you or is on your side or anything like that. It simply means that they're an asset. They're literally just something useful. Okay, and this guy was extremely knowledgeable. He had a whole lot of things which you have detailed to some degree, but I wouldn't mind hearing it again or getting it out there one more time. But the fact is that the head of ISIS was in our prison, was under our control if we wanted him to be at one point. And where is he now? What is going on now? It is the same kind of blowback, holding up the air quotes again for those of you listening, the blowback, okay, once again. And it seems like the same story is just, it's stuck on the same groove in the old-time record, my friend. It keeps going, where we have these people that we support for a while, then we don't support them, then they flip sides. If you look at the Libyan situation, which hardly anybody has examined fully, the same thing happened there. Okay? Saddam Hussein was a guy that we used to arm. The guy that we had to get rid of? He was the guy we were arming during the Iran-Iraq conflict. Yes? But of course we were also dealing with the Iranians, which, that long-forgotten piece of history that people don't ever want to talk about anymore. You remember the whole Iran-Contra thing? Well, those of us that are under the age of 30, I guess, have forgotten that entirely and don't even think it ever happened. It must be like a Disney movie to them. But it did happen. Okay, so suddenly, if you put this all in context, we were literally arming both sides of a conflict. This nation was. This kind of thing happens all the time in the Middle East. It's like a giant video game where you're just choosing who to back. And here's another perfect example. Al-Baghdadi, perfect example. So, go right ahead. I'm sorry, I know my analysis is way off the wall, and please tell me what kind of medication I need to take, sir, because I'm willing to trust your medical opinion a lot more than the doctors that I see around here. So, tell me what medication I need to correct my brain.
A good dose of reality TV. Okay. I picked up, what was at the Inquirer earlier today, I was coming out of our local store, and Kim Kardashian, okay, now is asking the wife of George Clooney, what is her name, Amal? Okay, she's a world-class human rights lawyer, famous in her own right. Kim Kardashian wants to be a consultant to Amal Clooney, all right, and consult on issues like the Armenian question and the Middle East issues, okay, like Egypt and so forth. Okay, So, no, hey, a good dose of reality TV always sets me straight about where my priorities are in the world. And what I have to say, and hopefully, and I say to your listeners, where it makes sense. These things make sense.
Wait a second. I looked down for a second and run that by me again about what Kim Kardashian wants to do.
Yes, I thought that might catch everybody's breath. Kim Kardashian. Okay, now, I'm kind of out of the entertainment loop. Okay, Kim Kardashian. Let me see. She doesn't sing. She doesn't. She's no actress. She doesn't do anything except something called reality TV, where a camera basically follows you around when you make an ass out of yourself and catches every moment of it. Her claim to fame is that her father was an attorney who worked on O.J. Simpson's defense team, and then her stepdad is someone named Bruce Jenner, okay, who used to be an Olympian, who is now undergoing some sort of sex change, okay, which is another part of the Kardashian story, okay.
Right.
So I guess all of this added together means that she is now somebody that has extraordinary information and knowledge about human rights issues, specifically Armenia and the Turkish question, and the Middle East. Okay, she wants to consult with Amal Clooney, George Clooney's wife, who's famous in her own right. Okay, she wants to give her consultation on how to deal with Egypt and the issues of Egypt now. Okay, civil rights, so and human rights. So maybe somebody calling in can explain it to me, but I'm a little befuddled. I'm sure I might have recruited some very well-known people. Now they weren't well-known at the time. They were just basically Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was in charge of what was called Mukhabarat, and Mukhabarat was the counterintelligence network set up and organized by Hussein to basically keep himself in power and keep track of all the terrorist groups that were trying to infiltrate Iraq. Remember, Iraq was and continues to be one of the wealthiest countries on earth. They have the largest sweet oil, low sulfur deposits of oil on earth. Okay, they actually dwarf most of the other Middle East countries, including Saudi Arabia. Boy, the PR folks of Saudi Arabia don't want you to hear that. But yes, Iraq is the country, and it has uber refineries to produce some of the best petroleum products to ship all over the world. Basically, Iraq could support the world with petroleum power for probably the next 25 to 30 years comfortably, without even flinching. Mm-hmm. So, yes, it's a very wealthy country. But the thing is, and of course, nobody's really after Iraq because of that. Now, as Dick Cheney and George W. Bush would say, we're there to help the Iraqi people, throw off the yoke of tyranny. I think that's what they said when they sent me, who I was getting ready to retire at the time, sent me to Iraq. So, I was there. I recruited Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He was basically a thug. He was a thug at the time. Okay, and he was terrorizing people, terrorizing his own people, and he worked for the Mukhabarat. But the most important thing that this thug had to offer was, first of all, he knew the whereabouts of Jessica Lynch. All right? Jessica Lynch, we all remember that poor female soldier who was caught just south of Ramadi, one of the first prisoners, okay, that we ended up losing, one of our soldiers we ended up losing. Her whole group was basically slaughtered, and she survived, and it was Mr. Baghdadi who said, oh yes, with a smirk on his face. He said, we know right where she is, and yes, we are showing her a very good time and taking very good care of her, which it doesn't take, I'm an average guy, average intelligence. So it took me no time at all to realize what he was saying to me. And I told him at the time, I said, fine, anything that happens to her, you're in my custody. The Shia policeman brought you in to me. I'm going to make sure that they do everything that was done to her, they're going to do to you. And probably, and I can actually say this with some sense of pride, that's probably one of the few times we'll see the blood drain out of Mr. Baghdadi's face, okay, was when I told him that. And he immediately told us where she was. It took 3 days to find her, but nevertheless, that was his contribution. Now, I didn't realize at that time that his connection to Mukhabarat was exactly what we needed, and he had access to one of the most massive databases, which ISIS is now using. Does anybody ask the question, why is ISIS so effective? Why do they seem to know everything? They know exactly who is who and who's doing what and when they're doing it and where they live, all right? And that includes Syria, okay, because the same system was developed in Syria at the same time under Hafiz Assad, okay? And so, who was working very closely, oddly enough, with Saddam Hussein. So that system still works very, very well, and it has all the information that we need to basically control Iraq and Syria, the heart of the Middle East.
Right. Before we get too much further, I did get a question, and you can text the questions on the Skype if you want to, but I'd rather you called in and asked them yourself. Just so you guys know, you can text me a question, that's fine. If you want to put it in the chat room, that's fine. If you want to call in, you can do that as well. Any of these things are acceptable to get the questions in because Mr. Ford likes to answer these questions. So they just heard the thing about Jessica Lynch, I guess, and they're asking about that. Okay, let me make sure of the name here. Yes, okay, so I'll just use your first name because I don't know that that's your last name. So Eric, all right, asks, wasn't the Jessica Lynch thing more of a PR stunt than a real event? Because she wasn't in any danger according to some sources. She was just being held in a hospital. Now, I don't know where this question comes from because I have my own viewpoint on the Jessica Lynch thing, but that question is obviously for you. So,
well, when I was sitting in a police station in Samara, in an invaded country, surrounded by hostile people, and we had gotten the word, get any information we could to find this soldier. That's all we're thinking about. We're not thinking about all the vagaries and intricacies of political intrigue like that. Okay, we just assumed that we didn't know she was in a hospital. We did find out, yes, she was in a hospital, and we didn't know. We assumed the worst. All right, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out, a young, pretty American woman in the hands of some very angry male Iraqis. Okay, it's not a pretty picture to think about. And so all we could do was move as fast as we could when we got the information to try to save her, before she became another fatality like the rest of her battalion that was wiped out.
Right. So, let me get at your question's his question's a little convoluted, Greg. So I'm going to say this. I think what he's trying to get at is, was it a real event or was it just kind of staged for the public? And I think you're here to say that it was a real event that you were aware of and actually involved in, because he was making pretty obvious threats. To put it quite bluntly, I mean, any captured prisoner in the Middle East is subjugated to all sorts of humiliation. They usually don't torture them so much or behead them as they seem to be doing now. But humiliation of a tortured individual who is seen as an invader is not unusual. And of course, you took his suggestions to be that she was going to be basically raped repeatedly for as long as they had her, and abused essentially. And so that's why you made it extremely clear to al-Baghdadi that anything that happens to her will definitely be visited back upon him, right?
That is absolutely correct. Now, all the political drama came later. We were concerned about getting her back, and getting her back alive with all her parts attached, and not seeing her head sawn off on the internet. Okay, that's what we were thinking.
Right.
It was a matter of moments, and every moment counted. When you're looking for one of your own soldiers like that, you have to grasp at anything that comes your way, and you have to move, and you can't. It's not for the weak-hearted. All right. There was plenty of anxiety because of these people, of our soldiers being taken prisoner like that. It shouldn't have happened, and if it wasn't for that stupid Marine company that intentionally misdirected Jessica Lynch's company just the opposite way and ran them right into Ramadi, okay, instead of the other way, which they should have gone. That situation should never have happened, but it did, and so we had to try to undo the damage, and that's all we could do was get her back. I think there was two. There was another woman who survived along with her. They were friends, and that was that out of the entire company. So it was a disaster, but we were doing our best to make sure it wasn't a total disaster. And of course, the media tried to portray it, like Jessica Lynch fought till the barrel melted off on her gun and so forth. I don't know. We were just interested in getting her back. That's what we were doing. All right, and so that's what that was probably one of the best things that Mr. Baghdadi has ever done and contributed to was helping to locate Jessica Lynch and her recovery. Now,
I find it amazing. I find it amazing, though, that when they discuss him in the mainstream press at this point, they never bring that particular thing up, do they? Is that because it's
no, they probably don't know. Very, very few people know. He was an unknown. He was virtually a nobody. Okay, until ISIS showed up. All right. Now, nobody's jaw dropped farther than mine when I heard ISIS being headed up by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. I had to check, several times to make sure it was the same guy. All right. I couldn't believe it. And sure enough, it has all matched up. Just yesterday, I was shown a picture of him back about the time when I recruited him. And, oh, yes, it's the same guy. He does look different now, okay, with his mullet beard and his ominous get-up clothes, for making presentations.
Right.
But, yes, it is the same guy. There's no question in my mind.
Well, only in recent, like say in the past month or two, have they kind of made it public that, this guy was a prisoner of ours at one point, stuff like that. But for the longest time when they were discussing this, ISIL, ISIS, IS, what is the meaning of is, so on and so forth. When they were discussing this, they didn't really talk about his background very much. This is just a radical leader, trying to, to recruit your wayward youth, as it were, trying to seduce them to the dark side of radical Islamic thought and everything else, and they spend a whole lot more time in the press arguing as to whether the Islamic State is Islamic or not. So they didn't really give us a good background on this, and I think that there's probably even more to his story than right. Personally. I mean, you can only speak to what you know and what you've been able to discover, but right. What I'm saying is there's probably a lot more to his story.
Well, I can say comfortably that sure he was a tough, psychotic, sadistic little shit. Okay, I think I could say the S word, okay, on your show.
Sure can.
Okay, there's no question about that. But that was the type that Mukhabarat recruited. They had no problems killing. They had no problems torturing their own people, and their sole devotion was to belong to Mukhabarat, make sure that Saddam Hussein stayed in power because their lives depended on Hussein staying in power, and to promote in Mukhabarat as an organization. Now, there's a couple of things that need to be brought out. First of all, is that I don't know how many times now I've had people call me and say, well, his name is really Elliot Simon, I think is what they're saying. Elliot Simon, he's really an Israeli. Okay. I didn't see any evidence of what is it, Sephardic or Ashkenazic, racial issues or Hebrew issues or anything like that with him. No, he seemed to be, in all sense of the word, a Mesopotamian youth that was recruited into Mukhabarat who had no qualms about torturing anybody to death. All right? And that's why he was in Mukhabarat. He had no qualms about killing, not one or two or three or 100 people. He had no problems killing, 500 people. Okay? He just had none.
Well, right,
okay?
And because the intelligence agency that Saddam Hussein was using, right, had a lot of aspects to it. They did straight up, recruit, people that you'd have no other choice but to call them thugs for various purposes. But this guy was a little more intelligent than your average street thug, from what I can understand. Okay, so therefore he could be entrusted to...
Informed. He was informed. Okay.
Right. But he could retain the information and he could use it, which is why they started putting some of these other lower-level thugs in his hands, as I understand it. This is the evolution of this guy. All right. Now, once Saddam Hussein's regime falls, right? There's that doesn't dismantle the intelligence agency. Let me tell you something, folks. If the United States government were to fall tomorrow, if you don't think the CIA would continue to breathe, you're out of your minds. These intelligence agencies are designed to be self-sufficient if necessary. They don't actually require the government anymore. That's kind of the thing that frightens me about them, actually, because they're their own separate animals. Okay? So the idea that the Mukhabarat would still continue to function, not very strange at all. So I'm sort of addressing something that was privately sent over about this, and I'm telling you right now that that's my estimation about this, is that, essentially there was an intelligence agency, and you could separate lots of intelligence agencies from their alleged legitimate government entities, and you'd still have a freestanding animal. Okay? And I do believe that even in the United States, we would still have the CIA, even if our entire government was being reorganized, that animal would continue breathing. All right? So this is what happened here. And then, after the entire country is balkanized, there's plenty of anti-American sentiment to be had. You now have plenty of people looking for legitimate payback. Not only that, but guess what? Mr. Ford has pointed out several times, if you go to a city, you go to a town, you go to a village, you go to whatever it is you want to call it, and word begins to get around that you are abusing the population, that you're, torturing them, that you are arresting them, that some people are disappearing, that people are being thrown off of bridges, that people are being set on fire, that people are being, this is going to cause, guess what? A little bit of resentment, folks. So legitimately resentful individuals are then easier to recruit. If people came to my city, took it over, and injured, critically, very seriously maimed or killed people that I cared about, and I didn't have a whole lot left to lose, if another group came along, just imagine this scenario in your minds, and said, look, we are all about getting payback on those people who did this to your family, to your friends, to your neighbors. How hard do you think it would be to get, especially high-strung, very, very angry individuals who are starting to feel as though they have nothing left to lose because their infrastructure has been destroyed as well. If you imagine that for a moment, it means that it's very easy to recruit these people. I don't understand how it is that there are people that don't get it. Like they're saying, well, they just hate us. That's all there is to it. It's not that they just hated us. They got legitimate gripes with the people that they think, are behind the uniforms, with the people that they think are behind the decimation of their villages. These aren't like, just rhetorical ideas in their minds. This is legitimate stuff. So this guy, who was part of a mechanism before that continued to breathe, if he wanted to recruit people, he'd probably have to turn them away after a while, because he'd probably be getting them faster than he could really charge them up and get them on board with what he's doing, even. considering all the damage that's been done over there. I'm sorry. Again, that's kind of my editorial on it, but I just wanted to give people an idea that, this is not a matter of trying to pump up the Islamic boogeyman, okay? Because there is an Islamic boogeyman out there, but there is also legitimately pissed off people, okay? And there are two things going on here. It's not just one. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, a couple of things that Mr. Baghdadi was able to help with. Okay, and that first of all was the Jessica Lynch issue, and then something that he gave me that was very valuable and it's proved valuable, and it came and that chicken came home to roost last week when the Central Intelligence Agency on President's Day made a very quiet announcement that for several years now they have been buying back. This is the Central Intelligence Agency, not the Cocaine Importation Agency, not the Culinary Institute of America. This is the Central Intelligence Agency, all right, the CIA. Stated, as I've told your listeners many times, but, I believe all of them know this by now, Chuck, is that, I told them weapons of mass destruction, U.S. manufactured weapons of mass destruction, were there in Iraq. Yes, and even more important, the pedigree, the provenance of those weapons was with them. Okay, was with those weapons. In other words, the records of their manufacture, of their transport, who paid for those weapons, and the most important thing, who ordered those weapons manufactured. Okay, that was the most important thing. Guess what, Bush crime family? Yes, your company, Carlyle, was responsible for those weapons of mass destruction. Yes, and that paperwork, yes, is in the court's custody and the FBI's custody. All right, that's where those weapons of mass destruction came from in Iraq, folks, and that's what the CIA has been trying to buy back using taxpayer dollars. All right, U.S. taxpayer dollars to buy back weapons of mass destruction that our own sitting presidents have sold to Saddam Hussein. All right, over the objections of the Senate, which said those weapons will not be sold to anybody unless it's dire emergency, as in being overrun by another country. All right, surprise! Those weapons showed up and they were used in the Anfal campaign. Okay, the Anfal campaign destroyed hundreds of thousands of Kurds. And they also were dropped on the Iranians. What's a big issue right now? Iran. Okay, Iran's really upset with America. Gee, imagine that. We killed hundreds of thousands of Iranian troops in the Shah al-Arab waterway, Hussein did, using our weapons of mass destruction. Okay, and if anybody has any question, okay, feel free to call in, because here's why. My other recruit in Balad, the old Air Force base, was the commander of the fighter bomber wing that dropped those weapons. He gave us the entire logistical database for those weapons, when they arrived, what it took to mount those weapons on his planes, ship those bombs. Okay, that's what they were reconfigured P-400, 1,000-pound bombs. Okay, they were reconfigured for dispersing VX/GF. All right, I've been over this 100 times with people, and I still get the glassy-eyed fish stare. Okay, what this means is, folks, is that yes, every detail now about the U.S. sale by the Bush family, by the Carlyle Group, is now in public archive and public record. All right, that's how they got those weapons. Those were the weapons that we invaded Iraq to find. All right, it's quite simply, we invaded Iraq to find those weapons and to clean up the Bush family mess. All right, the Bush family weapons of mass destruction sales mess. Okay, so one of the things that Mr. Baghdadi did give me was the other weapons. The VX/GF weapons. Okay, now I found 29. Okay, 29 that should have been reported to CNN, should have been reported to the American people. Of course, they were destroyed the next day. Those are the same weapons that Hans Blix was looking for, and his weapons inspectors. Okay, Baghdadi stated that it was the Mukhabarat who on heavy transport trucks removed most of the gold from the banks in Samarra. Samarra was known as the Golden City, and because of the gold exchange there, and that included a big chunk of the Al Qaeda gold transfers that had been made to the city of Samarra. Okay, just about the time I arrived, Al Qaeda was moving in also. It was one big happy party for everybody. Okay, the only people that were upset were the Americans because we were all dressed up and nowhere to go. Okay, so Mr. Baghdadi actually informed me that yes, when and where the transport was made of gold and the WMD, okay, that we were looking for, okay, and I did happen to find. That was transported to Syria, okay, another Sunni country, Syria, all right, and those were transported, and he gave me the sites where those were transported in Syria. I passed that information on to the FBI. The FBI has the entire set of weapons depots. That's where those are stored, in weapons depots. They have to be stored underground. They have to be stored at certain temperatures, okay, and only weapons depots can provide that. And that was all provided to the FBI during a 3-week brief after I returned to the United States. Now, Mr. Baghdadi, okay, had a very unusual treatment at our hands. Your listeners know me as the guy who filed the charges, criminal charges, against torture. Imagine this, at Abu Ghraib prison. Okay, now this was just confirmed by Senator Dianne Feinstein after a huge investigation. She has said, yes, everything that I told her was absolutely true, absolutely correct. It matched with the White House investigation of the torture and abuse, and it also matched with the FBI's investigation of the torture and abuse, both at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and also Abu Ghraib prison. Well, strange thing happened. When I made that report, of course, something really unusual, which has never happened in American history that I know of. Okay, I was forcibly abducted, strapped to a stretcher, tortured with CIA interrogation drugs. You know, the drugs that fry your brains. Okay, and probably some people are thinking out there, oh, this guy's had his brains fried. That's why he's saying all this. Okay, yes, they do cook your brains. Okay, my health has never been the same since. But the thing is that when I was grabbed, okay, and in order to keep it quiet about the torture program that was going on, the copper green program that was going on, that's the name of the program, which it has only expanded. It's expanded all over the world now. Okay, that program, okay, was basically my passport back, you know, to be tortured, renditioned, out of country, and with no orders. To date, no orders have ever been provided, you know, taking me from that theater forcibly and abducting me. Now, everybody's saying, well, what does this have to do with Baghdadi? Just about the same moment that when I was grabbed, Mr. Baghdadi was grabbed, and he was put into a place called Camp Bucca. All right? Now, and you can just type in his name, and that's probably the first reference you'll see, is Camp Bucca. Surprise, everybody, Camp Bucca was run by my command. Both Abu Ghraib and my command ran the interrogators and the counterintelligence agents at Camp Bucca. And because, you know, those pinheads that were running it, our people didn't realize that what access this young man had, okay, this al-Baghdadi had, they proceeded to send him on to Abu Ghraib prison, where he was even more abused. Okay, yeah, Camp Bucca, and and this is coming from all the interrogators that I knew, because they were in my command, that were there. They said yes, they were doing terrible things to people. This is what they told me. And so, hey, Mr. Baghdadi, who's already has issues about torturing people, okay, is being tortured himself, and this is the treatment that he's receiving at the hands of the Americans. So what does he do when he gets out? The first thing he said is, I'm coming back, America, and I'm coming for you specifically. Right. That's what his problems are. America.
You know what, Eric? If you're gonna keep asking questions on the Skype, I'd rather you called in. But I will ask this question because I think it's one that I never did ask Mr. Ford on the air. You obviously weren't sent to, excuse me. You obviously weren't sent to Iraq and being told that you're going to go there to torture people and to whip up anti-American sentiment, which is essentially what your command ended up doing. Although I state again that you were a medical person who was there actually patching up people, providing care for the individuals after the interrogations. I want to point that out again. But the thing is, you obviously weren't sent there with the idea that, listen, we're going to torture, kill people, we're going to do inhumane things to the populace. This is what you're going to do. What was it that you were actually sent there to do, or what was the nature? The exact phrase he uses here is, what was the nature of your orders when you were deployed?
My orders stated that we were to go to Iraq to locate either the facilities that would produce weapons of mass destruction or locate weapons of mass destruction. Of course, the implication was before that they can be used in some sort of terrorist strike. That's why we were sent there.
Okay. Well, because it is interesting because, of course, the mainstream narrative was this. Saddam Hussein is trying to buy yellow cake uranium. Everybody remember that one? So therefore he was trying to get this yellow cake uranium, and Colin Powell made a display there at the UN, I think it was, trying to show people what the nature of what it was Iraq was trying to do, why it is we needed to go in there as soon as possible, and all of this. And of course, that was the big thing, is that he, not only that, but the leap of strangeness for the mostly Saudi Arabian alleged hijackers on 9/11 to have been, backed in some way by Saddam Hussein. This is all rather odd too in my mind, but of course, let's not remember any of that stuff, right? It was all perfectly plausible, and I contend to this day that the American public accepted it more out of an anti-Arab sentiment among the general populace post 9/11 than any other reason. But let's just say that wasn't the case, and we were simply trusting our leaders at the time that this is what the purpose of this was. This is what the purpose of the entire invasion was, allegedly, to prevent any greater sort of damage from being done not only in other parts of the world, but to the United States, as if Iraq was a direct threat to the United States. This is what the concept was. Now, am I saying that that's why we went? No. And obviously, Mr. Ford is explaining to you that, just like the old joke, and I bring this up every time you're on the air, and I don't care, it still fits. Of course we knew they had weapons of mass destruction because somebody in the United States still had the receipts. And who would that be? Well, might be some of these guys from the Carlyle Group, which everybody knows was, one of our former president's, companies, right? So, makes all kinds of perfect sense to me. And yes, you were lied to again to drag you into another war that we didn't belong in. Of course, if you take a look at Vietnam and the Gulf of Tonkin, and you can find all sorts of instances where this occurred. Even the strangeness which brought us into the Korean War is rather questionable, but it's so far past people don't really want to get into it. But still dealing with that resonance today as we look at the the North Korean regime and everything else, and the only reason why they exist as they do is because of what went on then. But okay. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, Chuck, I can say this, that I was elated, okay, and of course I've been in the intelligence business for 3 decades up to that point, and I was elated when the colonel from the fighter bomber wing that I managed to recruit, just by accident, by the way, he took me into the bunker, and 2 stories down into the bunker. And it sounds now like I had a lot of confidence walking in. No, I just figured, okay, either I'd really done it then, or this was going to pay off. Okay, either I was going to have my head cut off on the internet, or I was going to trip a booby trap, which I expected those weapons to be booby trapped entirely, or that there was really something that this colonel, was going to deliver. And so anyway, of course it was, unbelievably hot and suffocating inside this bunker, and there was no light. All I had was the red light that I used on my vest, and so we walk in, but the only reassurance I had was that the colonel came with me, and because I thought, well, if I go, he's going. Okay, absolutely. So the colonel came in and said, all right, here you go. Get these things out of here. This is why you people, actually that's not the word he used, people. He used something else to describe us. You invaded our country for these weapons. This is the justification. You told the world, get these weapons out of here. Here's all the technical data on these weapons, and he gave it to me. Okay, everything from power source to how long it takes for the VX crystal, its salt crystals, to oxidize with its platinum oxidizer. He gave me all the information that was needed for those weapons, okay? And he said, get them out of here. He said, now, and as soon as you get these weapons out of here, you people get out of here. What you've done to our country now is monstrous, and it's wrong, and you people sold us these weapons. Get them out of here, and you can take Saddam Hussein with you. Okay, so he was very clear. He wasn't ambivalent about any of this. There was no PC in his language whatsoever. Okay, and so anyway, I looked, and sure enough, there was all the documentation about where those weapons were made. Fort Rucker, Alabama. If anybody has any questions, Fort Rucker, Alabama. Last time I checked, that was still in the U.S. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they were stored in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, transported to the Houston waterway. Gosh, who else do we know in Houston? The Bush family, maybe. Okay, and they were loaded up on the Wabash. I said this many times. They were loaded up on the USS Wabash, Navy supply ship, and transported. The entire system of documents was on each packing crate. These were called bills of lading. They were on each packing crate. Those weapons were sent there intentionally by the one person who had access to the company that was set up to sell these weapons to Saddam Hussein, and he had the deciding vote when he was vice president to Ronald Reagan. He could have actually cast his vote to remove those weapons from the earth. Okay, chemical weapons could have been completely deleted from the arsenals, but no, he chose. And this is George H.W. Bush. He chose to keep these weapons because he saw a profit that could be made from these weapons. All right, these weapons. All right, and these weapons were, of course, they made the Bush cartel of Carlisle a huge fortune. And then here is America, as the CIA said last week. Here we are buying back those weapons, using, again, taxpayer dollars to go take the weapons that we invaded the country for, a sovereign nation for, spent several $1 trillion, not billion, not million, $1 trillion to invade, and then here we are having to buy these weapons back in secrecy, okay, in secrecy, and the only reason the CIA said that, quote, I'll quote the CIA, that that they came out with this announcement. There's one very quiet announcement, I might add, is that supposedly some U.S. troops may have been exposed to the chemical neurotoxin on these weapons. Oh, great. Gee, no wonder George W. Bush was asking the Veterans Administration not to pay for the medical treatment on several of these veterans that are coming back with very non-specific symptoms. No wonder, because he knew exactly what was causing those symptoms. Okay, sure, you can call it the burn pit syndrome and whatever you want, but he knew what was causing those neurological symptoms was exposure to VX/GF. All right, so and then okay, I want to jump track here. Can I talk about something that just happened today, Chuck?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, great. Yeah, because this happened today. I got a call from my researcher, and he said something very strange has happened, and he sent me the material. Okay, so when I put my court case together, and by the way, everybody listening, I invite you to read my court case. If you think this is all hyperbole and a little embellishment on my part, former intelligence operative and all this stuff, everybody knows that spies like to embellish their stories to make themselves sound more important than they really are. Right. Please go read my court case, 14-15050, and in the Ninth Circuit Court. All right, you'll read exactly what I have told you, and it is official. And I even have my former boss, Brigadier General Janice Karpinski, supporting me on this case. She is supporting me. So, yes, and you can hear that when I have oral arguments. If the courts decide to allow me to have oral arguments on my case, you will, everybody is, by the way, every one of your listeners is invited to come to the courtroom in San Francisco and hear this case presented, and you can hear exactly what I've just told you. This will be in a court of law, in the Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco. So it will be quite an affair, to be quite honest. So anyway, but as of today, I was notified that something very strange has happened. Since war crimes charges are being drawn up in Nuremberg for who else? George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld. Gee, imagine that. After all these years, they're finally getting around to this. Well, it seems that war crimes charges were drawn up in a place called Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And everybody said, "Oh, okay, well, great. That is a human rights accord," and they were found guilty of war crimes abuses, committing war crimes. That's George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld. Well, I was informed by my researcher who said something very strange has happened now. That those records, which, by the way, I have copies of, that are part of my court documents that your listeners can see, anybody else can't see them now because they have been, quote, classified by our government. Okay, classified now. They were unclassified when I received them, and now they are classified. Okay, well, those documents spelling out the war crimes that have been committed in places like Afghanistan and Iraq will be presented, okay, as part of my oral argument on my case. Those documents, in spite of the fact that, quote, they are no longer available, all right, to the public. Mm-hmm. That's what happened today. Those documents, yes, are available, and that happened with a legitimate war crimes tribunal in Kuala Lumpur, and they are forming the premises for war crimes charges against the Three Musketeers, the unholy triumvirate, all right, the unholy cabal of George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld, all right. So those charges are going to happen again at Nuremberg, and it sounds like today, after what I'm hearing about General Petraeus yes, it sounds like General Petraeus will probably be there also. All right, because as I've only said this a couple of times to your listeners, when I was in Samara, there was something very strange going on. Okay, in Samara with me. Yes, we were at the police station. All right, completely surrounded by the graveyard. There's a huge graveyard there. It's probably the oldest graveyard in existence, about 5,000 years old. And it goes back to biblical times, as you might imagine. But down the street, there was something very odd happening. And I think this has something to do with ISIS and its behavior now, all right? There was something down the street, and I didn't know about this till I was called one night about 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was the front gate, and we had several Bradleys, which are like small tanks, and armored vehicles blocking the gate into our compound. And somebody called and said, "Hey, Doc, get your medical bags, come down to the gate. You're not going to believe this." Okay, and this one incident right here tells me that we should bring up General Petraeus on war crimes charges. All right.
Okay.
I went down, and it was a Sunni man standing there, very clearly in shock. In shock. Okay, he was, yeah, and this was pretty ghastly, as you might imagine, that I have in my memory now of him standing there under mercury vapor lights, and he had no arms. His arms had been sawn off with a chainsaw, and from what we could get before he finally just fainted and died, he bled to death. There's nothing I could do. Okay, is that down the street there was something called the Library of Blood. All right, the Library of Blood. It sounds like a bad movie, doesn't it? Okay,
yeah,
like a Boris Karloff movie, The Library of Blood.
That's just what I was thinking is one of those really bad, like late 60s, early 70s horror movies that was on a low budget.
Exactly. Yeah. Right, exactly. The Black Castle and the Library of Blood.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that Mr. General David Petraeus had started several Shia death squads, and the Library of Blood was a death squad of Shia that was grabbing Sunni. Now, everybody remembers who ISIS is. There are no Shia in ISIS. There are only Sunni. And they were doing so many horrible things that the walls were being sprayed with blood, all right? It completely coated the walls of the inside of this library. That's why it was called the Library of Blood. And it was being done basically in our name, okay? I can't think of a bigger PR disaster than that issue right there, the Library of Blood, being run by Sunni, Shia death squads, and being drawn up by General David Petraeus. All right? Now, he has a reputation of being the Jimmy Stewart of the military. Kind of easygoing, I'm just a nice guy, everybody loves me, Well, yeah, be careful of those types, folks. Be careful because guess what? He used that I'm just a nice old Jimmy Stewart kind of guy. He retired from the military, and they stuck him immediately into the head of the CIA, which he no intelligence experience whatsoever. All right, and then he turns right around and commits, with the whole world watching him, the whole world begging for any tender, juicy tidbit of scandal. Okay, he proceeds to take a mistress of a junior officer, and then gets caught with information that had something to do with Libya and possibly the lost election of President Obama. All right, that's what that all has to do with, was an intentional targeting of President Obama to keep him from getting reelected, and that was in that information concerning that embassy at Benghazi. So that's what it's all about. That's what's going on. Okay, now your listeners should be about now ready to say, who are these people that were in charge of this country? Who are these people? Okay?
Right.
You know, I mean, who are they? You know, they were doing what in my name? And they were taking my tax dollars that I have to pay. You know, that the average person that we're speaking to right now pays more money than who is the Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody that is in the sound of our voices, Chuck, it pays more money in taxes than Warren Buffett pays. All right.
Right.
So that's where those tax dollars go, to buy back weapons of mass destruction that weren't supposed to exist, and then end up supporting schemes. I mean, unbelievable schemes like having the embassy at Benghazi incinerated, losing our ambassador, you know, to try to use that as an intelligence dupe, an intelligence coup. All right. So now, you know, I always appreciate you letting me talk, Chuck, like this. But hey, how about the Washington, the D.C. madam? Okay, does anybody want to hear about that?
Well,
You know?
I got one thing that somebody slid over to me in a link here about your court case. So I want to address that real quick, and then we'll go over to that. I'm looking at. Okay, I've just had a chance to scan this. There was a bunch of filings. They seem to think that your court case was dismissed in December of 2013. I think what that is.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Is that it was then reinstated, though?
It's stated on appeal. It was in the 6th District Court, and something very odd happened with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The U.S. Attorney's Office they're the architects of the torture memo.
Right.
Okay, John Yoo, William Haynes, the torture memo. Well, guess what? They're all here in Sacramento. Okay, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Sacramento, and
let me just give a couple of details really quick here.
Sure, you bet.
So this way we're answering to exactly what this shows, because it was finally ordered. This shows a succession of dismissals of various motions and things, and then it was officially dismissed at that time on December 13th, 2013, apparently. Then, now, in that filing, that's a different case number than it is now, first of all, and it was originally filed on September 14th, 2012, according to this document trace thing they sent me here. California Eastern District Court, Sacramento office, the county of Sacramento. Okay.
That's correct.
The presiding judge was Kimberly J. Mueller, looks like.
Right.
Right, and this is jury demanded by plaintiff, which was you. So you wanted a jury trial. They denied a series of motions and then actually dropped the case. Then it was refiled, but I don't see where it was refiled here. But it has been and is actively on the docket now.
Yes, that's correct.
So I just wondered
in San Francisco.
Yeah, I just wondered if you'd sort of explain what happened there, because they're like, well, isn't that court case over with? And I'm trying to. I don't want to speak out of school about it and say no, it's not, and here's why. I'd rather that you just kind of explain that the case is not a dead issue.
Right. Now, heaven forbid if untoward influence is ever found in U.S. courts. Okay, I couldn't imagine that ever happening. Well, it turns out that the U.S. Attorney's Office, like I said, who's entirely responsible for the Abu Ghraib disaster and the Guantanamo disaster, it was 3 floors down from the Kimberly Mueller's office, Judge Mueller's office. Okay, there in the 6th District Court. It was ascertained, not that they would ever walk up to her office and try to influence, her decision in any way, shape, or fashion. I'm not implying that at all. Okay, given the fact that the U.S. Attorney's Office is already being roasted alive for their involvement in justifying torture with their memos, but it was ascertained that because this case would require the possibility of new laws being made new laws being formed that absolutely, positively, it could not be heard in the sixth district court, because the sixth district court does not have it in its power to make any new laws that could possibly result from this case. Imagine that. We might not have the legal justification for torturing somebody to death. Okay, excuse me, organ failure. That's what they call it, organ failure. And so anyway, yes, that's what happened. It was immediately, as I expected it would be. Okay, I expected that Kimberly Mueller's just said, please get this thing out of here. And she was very supportive, by the way. She said, get this thing off my docket. We can't make laws. Get it to the Ninth Circuit Court where they can make laws, okay, to prevent travesties like this. So she said that, and that's why it was dismissed, and immediately I filed with the Ninth Circuit Court, and that's where it is now.
Right. Now, generally speaking, I just wanted to explain this, that, I only took a brief sort of glance over what they sent me here regarding this, and you can find this on the internet. But the thing is, it appears to me as though, because the particular court it was in, the judge that we're talking about here that is signing these dismissals and dismiss those previous motions that you show there on the chain of what occurred with this particular case file. Okay, the reason for that is that particular court can't set a precedent. There is no precedent in existence in a United States court, to my knowledge, for your circumstance. That's what the problem is here. So
yes, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So she literally dismissed it, not because there was no reason for it, or because it was just a I forget what they call it, lascivious, whatever it is. It just basically means that it's one of those lawsuits that has no merit to it. It wasn't dismissed for that purpose. It was dismissed because
frivolous.
Frivolous. That's it. Right. I was looking for that word, frivolous. And the thing is, it wasn't dismissed for being a frivolous lawsuit. It was dismissed because that particular court is not the place for it. But now in the Ninth Circuit, where it resides, it is in the right hands. Of course, they're moving kind of slowly, but this is the nature of things. And as these events we're talking about are unfolding, okay, more and more information is becoming public knowledge. This is going to change the face of your case a bit too, isn't it?
Absolutely. And this is also the district of Dianne Feinstein, who is the leader of the House Committee on Intelligence and Collection, where all of this goes and where all of this went in the first place. And also my command. Okay. My command is in the 9th District. Okay. It's in San Francisco. That means that is the proper place. But unfortunately, there's never been a case like this. There's no case precedent, as you say, Chuck. And so that means that this case had to be, basically dismissed and then moved to the venue, that can allow for the formation of new laws, okay, or new regulations, new laws, or whatever resulting from this case. As I put in, in San Francisco, you can read this online. I state that the entire premise of the United States invading Iraq is the premise of this case. So, in a nutshell, yes, anybody can read it. It's in San Francisco. It's not in Sacramento anymore. Okay, it's not in the 6th District. It's in the 9th District. And I am looking forward. And like I say, every one of your listeners is invited to come sit in the courtroom with me while I present exactly what has happened. And as a court reporter told me not too long ago, he said, OMG. He said, I have never seen, in 40 years of doing this, I've never seen anything that would approach the nature of this case. This is absolutely miraculous that this case, first of all, ever happened. But secondly, what you're representing in this case is truly miraculous.
And what was that case number one more time? Because I wanted to actually pull up the newer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
One.
It's 14-1 15050.
Okay. I just wanted to go get it because I it's you know.
Get it online for your folks. That it helped me, Chuck. And your informed listeners help me. All right. It might sound selfish and self-centered, but it helps me. Okay. Nobody has stepped forward to help me on this case. Everybody says, "Go get them, Tiger, eat them up," but nobody has given me any money, finances, any. The only person that has supported me so far with her power of authority of office is Brigadier General Janice Karpinski.
Right. I'm just trying to pull up this thing so I can A, pass it to the other person who found that the dismissal, and B, drop it into the chat room and stuff for them. So trying to grab it now. I know I put up the original filing, which was in 2012. I gave that to you guys before the PDF.
Right. That's correct. Right.
And I posted that elsewhere just so people can see it because it's for the statement, which is still virtually the same in the new case, I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Now the of course the U.S. Attorney's Office is trying to weasel out of it. That they're trying to say, "Oh, well, yeah, we did all these things." They never denied any of these things that happened. That's how good my documentation is. They've never denied it. Oh, they never just said, "Oh yeah, we weren't really torturing anybody." No. Oh yeah, we did. And now the gooses are cooked because Dianne Feinstein and her committee has said this is what we were doing. Forget organ failure as a standard of torture. Where you're supposed to stop when somebody's heart quits. Oh yeah, you're supposed to stop. So it's not really torture, right? No. And then now the CIA, which is spelled out in my case. Yes, there were weapons of mass destruction, which everybody has said. The DOD has said no, there weren't. It's all nonsense. And this is the product of a vivid imagination, mine. All right. Maybe those CIA drugs really did cook his brain after all. Well, surprise. Here's the CIA as of last week saying, yes, America, yes, we have been using your tax dollars to buy those weapons of mass destruction that Dr. Ford, Gregory Ford, said, yes, we're there. All right. And his intelligence reports borne out, the fact that they were there.
Okay, so, for the listeners' clarification, okay, the case was filed once again on January 13th, 2014, and that was in the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Ninth Circuit. Okay, the nature of the suit is kind of strange because it says it's under other civil rights, and you can find that with the case number that Mr. Ford just gave you, and the plaintiff applicant is Frank Gregory Ford. The defendant applyee is Victor Ortega, Merrill Madeira, Timothy D. Ryan, Thomas M. Pappas, and United States of America. Okay, so that's how it was refiled, and that's when it was refiled, and there you go.
Right.
I'll give you guys that link in the chat too.
That is the by the way, that is the command for your listeners. That is the command of Abu Ghraib prison. They were at the command. They were the commanders of Abu Ghraib prison. Okay, that's what gave us the world's, the U.S. most disastrous war crimes of all time. Those four people right there. All right, they're be held responsible in every sense of this case. Now you ask about civil rights. Well, last time I checked, and I don't think there's too many of your listeners that would argue this, is being strapped to a stretcher, tortured and abducted, okay, they have laws against that. They even have laws against that in the United States, amazingly enough, all right? When you follow the law, as I did, and filed charges against torture and abuse that was going on, that I had to deal with, and I had to provide medical care for, and to turn right around and forcibly abduct me through German airspace. By the way, the Germans are still hot under the collar. Okay, they are. And you can read my case in Der Spiegel. Okay, my case in Der Spiegel, and it was under Hilmar Buchel. Okay, the senior editor of Der Spiegel did my case, and it was the most watched three-night biography of all time in Germany, all right, was my abduction and how I was carried against my will through German airspace. I was flown to Ramstein. So.
Well, right. I did post that in the chat for you guys and all that. Now, I'm sorry I kind of got sidetracked onto the, but I take every opportunity I can to mention the case and to explain it. And when somebody passed it to me and said, well, the case has already been dismissed, I knew it was still active. It just didn't know exactly where to find it. And there you go. It was, again, a little over a year ago, filed with the Court of Appeals afterwards. So that's where it is.
And I'll say this for your listeners, imagine this, is that lawyers trying to hide something that they're involved in and obfuscate the truth. Imagine that, okay? I couldn't, not until this case. But that is exactly what I've seen, is runaway court systems. And the U.S. Attorney's Office, despite the lofty terminology in its name, they are probably the worst, the most, viable culprits of abrogating our civil rights as citizens. Their whole job, and as I had some smug clown by the name of Ben Wagner tell me, okay, by the way, he was the one representing the U.S. Attorney's Office on my case. He said, our job, and he kind of turned his eyes to heaven as he said this, is to make sure that no case, no matter how credible its merits, ever reaches the courtroom. And we will use any tactic to keep it from ever being heard in a public venue. And that's true. Virtually every case that's filed against the government is beaten down by the U.S. Attorney's Office. And they're very proud of it. They're very proud that they go out of their way to make sure that our government doesn't have to obey its own laws.
Well, right. That was the whole, the torture memos that were issued about how it seems legal if we, frame it this way and so on and so forth. So there you go. You did say you were going to discuss the D.C. Madam, though.
Yes. Oh, yes. Right. Boy, we keep getting off on these issues. Okay. I mean, imagine weapons of mass destruction, 2 endless wars that are still going on, over these weapons of mass destruction and these supposed terrorists. Now, Jean Palfrey, okay, yes, the D.C. Madam. I mentioned that briefly last time. She was a friend of mine. And Jean, and whatever the issue, politics makes strange bedfellows, pardon the pun, but Jean was a D.C. Madam, and she informed me, on no uncertain terms, exactly how dirty our politicians are. And very seldom do you see a U.S. media magazine state in rather gleeful terms that there were several politicians in Washington that were just thrilled beyond all description when her body was found hanging in a garden shed at her mother's home. She supposedly had committed suicide after a court trial for what was it? Pandering. I think one of those nefarious legal terms that they like to use. Pandering. Basically, it's prostitution.
Pandering, solicitation, all these types of terminologies.
Right, yeah. Well, they use those terms when they've got politicians involved, and they don't want to exactly call a spade a spade. Okay, they don't want to do that. So what they do is they give it these ambiguous terms and so forth. So I was, because of my case, I was able to meet her originally. And after she had said, okay, these people are nuts. These people are out of control and they're dangerous. And so she was busy trying to transfer her resources out of the United States. And that's how she ended up being prosecuted, okay, for pandering, all right? Now, I always found it strange, and so did she, that she's running a social entertainment, okay, I think that's what they call that euphemistically, social entertainment circuit, okay, for our politicians, all right? And one of the leading politicians that was using her services was somebody that her girls nicknamed the Shitter. Okay, that was his name. Okay, I don't know if I can say that on the air, but
it's okay. It's okay, but that sounds kind of funny. And wait a minute, let's think about this for a minute, because who, I wonder, would get that kind of nickname? And meanwhile, I always put it on the backdrop of the whole thing with the now gone Barney Frank and the call boy instead of call girl, solicitation charges and all those scandals.
The pages, right?
Well, not only the pages, but there was also this other stuff about prostitutes and boy toys visiting the White House and all of this other scandal, and that all sort of vanished. But the D.C. Madam thing continued on, right? And they were going to get her in court and they were going to convict her of something. That's a guarantee.
It didn't really matter what. They were going to get her.
Yeah, that was going to be had. Yeah. And then, amazingly and coincidentally and rather conveniently for a lot of people, a lot of times this does seem to happen, doesn't it, that somebody just decides to end their own life, allegedly, at a key moment. And of course, here we go again. Here we go again. She's in the midst of, basically preparing to deal with what's coming down the pike, getting ready to deal with the fact that she's probably going to become an expatriate. And next thing you know, she's found dead, allegedly of a suicide again, just like so many others. And this, of course, has always kind of rung very strange in my head. And and I wondered about it. I mean, I got to admit, and I've heard people discuss this many times. And, and a lot of people have said, well, what would be the big deal and all of this. But I think that once you start to examine who might have actually been in that paperwork, whose names really would have come out had they actually, not disposed of her in one way or another, this is where it gets actually a lot more fascinating. Because, I mean, personally to me, I'm not so concerned if people are prostituting themselves to one another in any way, shape, or form, generally speaking. It's not my worry. I don't think about these kind of things. It's not the big bother of the world as far as I'm concerned. But plays well in the Bible Belt and all that, doesn't it? And but what happened here? Meanwhile, I haven't forgotten this point, and I did stop you at the point where the girls were calling this guy the Shitter, which I hope it's not for the reason that I think you're going to tell me, and I'm not even sure who it is, but I hope it's not for the reason you're going to tell me, and I have a strange suspicion that I might know the name of the Shitter. So, go ahead.
Well, by the way, when you talk about prostitution, I looked at my defendants in my case, okay, and they were willing to commit murder. They were willing to do the most horrific acts for money. Okay, so, on the face of it, when somebody provides sexual services for money, that is child's play compared to the defendants in my case, what they were willing to do for money.
You got it.
All right? They were willing to destroy integrity in every sense of the word. I mean, as I had several Iraqis come to me and say, you are Americans. You aren't supposed to be doing this. Have you lost your minds? Okay? That's what they said. Have you lost your minds? I had to tell them, yes, we have. How could I justify what those defendants did to their people?
Well, that's the thing. It pales in comparison on the moral scale, if you will. I mean, I would rather, that our politicians came from a straight up prostitute background, than doing the things that they do to gain the fortunes they seem to gain. You know what I mean? I would much sooner trust the honest transaction there that doesn't kill thousands, in the name of a profit. So, sorry, but go ahead.
Well, I gave the number, by the way, of two of the defendants who are now earning six-figure salaries for being involved in the torture and murder and assassination of people of Iraq. All right, I gave them the number, your listeners a number where they can be reached to confirm everything that I've told these people. That and they worked, by the way, for the Booz Allen subsidiary, okay, of the Carlyle Group. Gee, imagine that. Okay, these people helped hide weapons of mass destruction, did not notify the American people that these things had been found, and then turned right around and then got great jobs, 6 figures, okay, working for the Carlyle Group because they were willing to deceive the American public, were willing to commit war crimes. All right, so compared to Jean Palfrey and her ladies, her ladies of the entertainment industry, this is small potatoes. Okay,
right.
So Jean says, oh yes, it's amazing, and it always amazes me. Although even though I've been in the intelligence business, there's nothing that a man won't tell a woman in intimacy. And quite often, a man, I've seen this all over the world, will do anything and tell a woman anything that he thinks will keep her attention and make her think that he is much more powerful and much more in control, okay, than he is. All right?
Right.
Keep her attention. It's truly amazing. Okay, it's almost, it borders on surreal at times. Yeah, but that's some of the basis of intelligence work is the honeypot, okay, the honey trap. So anyway, Jean informed to me that her girls, okay, she referred to them, her girls were really concerned about one of their customers, and they didn't like actually providing services for him, okay. He had something where he would have the gals lie underneath a plate of glass, and he would squat down, pull his pants down, squat down, and pop a turtle head out, okay? And I mean, these gals see everything, but that one always set their nerves ajar, okay? They really had to bite down, pardon the pun, and take it to do that trick, as they call them. And that person was, who else, okay, but Dick Cheney. All right? Dick Cheney. I didn't stumble, I didn't mumble. She said it was Dick Cheney. And I said, I don't know what to say, Jean. And she said, well, look, she said, if you had to get what he had to get from Lynn, who writes books about, what is it, sadomasochistic Japanese lesbians, okay, I mean, I'd probably be squatting over a plate of glass too, I guess, popping out a turtle head, I mean, but I mean, that's pretty grim, but.
You have, congratulations, sir. You have just placed a visual into my mind that will guarantee that I will not sleep well tonight. That's for sure. Oh.
Well, I said, okay, well, what else did he tell you? And he confided to several of his women that were providing services, that when he was, as Secretary of Defense, that he disappeared for weeks on end, okay? And what he actually was doing when he went to these, seminars, symposiums, okay, were something like this. He was planning, okay, with our Defense Department, in secret, first of all, and this is highly illegal, the aggressive invasion of a sovereign nation of Iraq. And he was planning at that time, this is about 2000, this was earlier when he was Secretary of Defense. He was planning for the year 2000. And he was going to implement the death squads that had been formed in El Salvador, okay, with Operation Q-Bark, okay? Now, I have the documentation on that, and that will be in the courtroom. Operation Q-Bark, okay? Highly illegal, and it is now being tried in The Hague Okay, anybody involved with Operation Q-Bark is being tried as a war criminal, and guess who was responsible for formulating these horrible death squads and torture chambers? Dick Cheney, all right, in El Salvador. And what he was doing was he was also planning some great, big, huge terrorist strike. That was a huge terrorist strike that was supposed to happen after 2000. This is what he tells his ladies, his girls, that what he was subjecting the turtle head to. Okay. Was exactly these things. When he was Secretary of Defense under George H.W. Bush, he was already planning what we have now. All right, entirely. He planned it. He was behind it, and and this is what he told the women that were working underneath Jean Palfrey when she was a D.C. madam. So these were just some. That's not all the information that she informed me of, but that was just some of the information. And as a result, some of these women were really becoming frightened. Okay, what he had to say, and of course they were frightened of him because besides popping out turtle heads, he was also really violent with some of these women, and he really has a sadistic streak, and they really did not particularly like having to service him or provide sexual services to him because of these issues. So this is what Jean Palfrey had informed me of, and then we had dinner, and it was always interesting when we had dinner. There was this entourage of cars, government cars. I've never seen so many Crown Victorias in my whole life. Okay. I thought they were supposed to be limited, aren't they? Isn't there something about a Crown Victoria supposed to be limited, like a certain number only available? Well, every time I met her, or like for dinner or something like that, there was these huge caravans of men in cheap suits, okay, black sunglasses, and Crown Victorias, okay. I guess that's a sort of a uniform now, okay. But anyway, she said that's why she had also been stopped from. She was trying to go to Austria. She was trying to move her residence to Austria and take her financial banking to Germany. When she was notified that, first of all, her banking system had been intercepted, and the feds were watching her to begin with, and that's what they prosecuted her on, was trying to ship money out of the United States. It didn't actually prosecute her on the pandering issue. It was just the color, okay? That was very colorful. That was the spice in this whole thing. Right. They were able to get her on something much more simple, which was always money, as I said. Even in the most intricate intelligence operations that I've been involved in, it's always money, all right? It's always money at the basis of everything. Weapons of mass destruction, it's money. 9/11, it's money, all right? Just ask Mr. Silverstein, okay? Building number 7, 9/11, okay? It's money, all right? It's always money. And that's how these gals that had to service Mr. Cheney, okay, the shitter, a.k.a. the shitter, all right, that's why they were involved. Money, all right, it's always money. Okay, that is the human condition.
When you first mentioned this to me, that was the person that it just made the most sense it would be, because I somehow knew that this was going to come this way, and I didn't want to imagine it, but it just, my brain sort of jumped right to Cheney. And I just kind of went, well, no, it couldn't be. That's too obvious. But,
yeah, right.
Wow.
Well, it's great. It's great. When I see him in a cowboy hat, okay, boy, gee, that's really great. I can imagine him in a cowboy hat squatting over a plate of glass, okay, popping out a turtle head. I mean, that's just too much, okay. And he talks about how he wants to go home to Wyoming, his home state, I mean. And I think, oh, great. Is he gonna tell the people of Wyoming now that he was ripping them off from, all those years from Halliburton's not paying proper oil transport taxes, which he set up, of course. Okay, is he going to do that before he goes home? And then I saw the other night he said that he was going to have his ashes when he passes away. The passing of a great man. It's like the passing of George H.W. Bush. Everybody's saying it's the passing of a great man. What I really don't understand that myself. But when Dick Cheney passes away, he's going to have his ashes cast in a secret place. Well, he better. I can tell you that right now, because if I have anything to say about it, I'm going to make sure that he's mixed in with some hog feed somewhere. All right, I can guarantee that. After what the atrocities that I've seen in Iraq that were done at his hand in Central America that were directly resulting from him, I think that would be a good, a just finishing for Mr. Dick Cheney. To end up in the guts of some hog.
See, I got to take issue with you here because, it's not the hog's fault. Why would you subject a hog to that? I'm sorry. I feel bad for the hog.
Well, a hog. I could just imagine a hog wearing a cowboy hat and a pair of glasses. Okay, with his smug robber baron look on its face. That would be Dick Cheney. Okay, in the bowels of a hog. Yes, I could see it now. So and I can also thank him for the death of my friend Gene Palfrey, hanging in a garden shed. And by the way, everybody says, well, if maybe it was a suicide. Well, funny thing was the Dunedin, Florida police station was in charge of doing the forensic examination of Gene. Gee, the Dunedin police station, I'm sure they have mass spectral analysis, to examine any kind of toxicity in a postmortem exam like that. I'm sure they could. But the thing was that, there were no marks on her body. Well, as I put out, intentionally, as I have found the third world intelligence services, like when they like to make a suicide look like a suicide, they inject into the navel, okay, especially with a woman who's not heavy enough to really hang herself, okay, which Jean wasn't. She weighed, 120 pounds? And she wasn't. So, surprise, none of those tests were done to find out if she had been injected in her navel, which is normally how they do that, and then hung. Women don't hang themselves, almost as a rule. They simply do not hang themselves.
Yeah,
there's Jean hanging in her garden shed.
That's one of the bizarre things. Generally speaking, when women commit suicide, and I've talked to lots of forensic pathologists over the years, and the subject has come up from time to time. When women commit suicide, it's generally either a chemical thing, they overdose on pills. Pills is a definite favorite mode. The other one is is to slash the wrists. Again, sort of. I've had it explained to me in a kind of a weird way that it sort of doesn't damage them. Like it still leaves them, fully intact, and these are the two methods that usually a woman uses in deciding to commit suicide. And I'm not stating that I know for a fact that she didn't, but it's just another one of these odd anomalies in that case where, women don't hang themselves. That's usually guys do that. They just do.
Right, and they don't do it at their mother's home. Okay, she was in Dunedin, Florida, when she supposedly, put a rope around a rafter in a garden shack out behind her mother's mobile home, and committed suicide. Okay, I don't buy it. I didn't buy it then. I don't buy it now, and especially after what she has told me. Okay, and given me evidence about who has done what in our government. Okay, I don't buy it for 1 second. And I think Dick Cheney was probably there pushing that button too.
Right. Now, listen, we're just about to run out of time, believe it or not. It always seems to fly by when I'm talking to you, man. It's gone. 2 hours just disappears. But do you have any word on the progress regarding the book, or is that still an issue that?
Well, we're chapter number 6, okay. But as try as we might, we were having a hard time. I just met with my biographer just the day before yesterday, and he's having a hard time because the new events that keep coming up. With the CIA being held culpable for torture and abuse, based on what I informed Dianne Feinstein, Senator Feinstein's committee about, okay, the issue of ISIS, okay, and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. These are all chapters that keep getting added. So we're having a really tough time getting it below 500 pages. Nobody wants to hear me go on and drone on for 500 pages, but we're having a real tough time getting it there. So we are doing our best. We're up to chapter number 6, but we're still on schedule. We probably will be on schedule for January of this coming year.
Okay. Well, that's something else. And of course, I urge everybody to take a look at the court case, which I dropped into the chat there. Greg has already said the number, so you guys can look it up. It's in the 9th District Court there in California, in San Francisco. And I already read all these details. So I do want you guys to explore that. Take a look at what it is he has to say. Of course, he's been on my show now about 6 or 7 times, I think. And we've had a lot of interesting discussions about a lot of different things, but extremely remarkable. And I can't thank you enough for your time and the courage that you have in telling the stories that you do. And of course, I leave it to the judgment of the listener to sort it all out. But doesn't it seem as though this sounds a whole lot like the things I like to rant about when I'm talking all by myself on here? Doesn't it sound just like the out-of-control stuff I keep telling you guys about? Doesn't it sound like it's everywhere? And in fact, it's just the biggest surprise in the world to me that they let this guy live. Of course, we have discussed why that happened. And I don't know, Greg, if there's anything you want to add here in the last minute or so, go right ahead before that horrendous music kicks in and kills us.
Well, the only issue that I have is, and I'm sure your listeners probably have the same issues now, and mine, I can honestly say it's something called anger management, all right? Anger management for what has been done to me and what has been done to this country in the name of these people, all right? That I have anger management with that, and I'm sure any of your listeners have the same issue. So, thanks for having me, Chuck. I greatly appreciate it. And have me back. If your listeners aren't bored to tears with me now, okay, I'd love to be back, okay, and giving some opinions on everything else that seems to be happening. There's a new event, new issue every day, all right, just like today. So, if you'll have me back, I'll be more than glad to talk to your listeners, okay? I enjoy their questions, and I enjoy, the really bright, intelligent things that they have to say. So, anyway, invite me back, Chuck, please.
Well, absolutely. And next time we'll try and get some regular live callers in. I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody's questions on Skype, but I really didn't want to keep pulling the flow back and forth, through different ideas there. But I'll collect them all up, and believe it, if you guys want to drop me more stuff, you can do it on Facebook. You can send it to my Skype in text any which way you want, and I will make sure that I compile them and go through them one at a time with Mr. Ford if we haven't already asked him the question. Okay, so if it's a new issue, I will gladly go over it. And I want to thank everybody for listening tonight. The Ochelli Effect is just about done. No matter what you think out there, there is a lot of terrible things that do go on in the world, and you know what? A lot of it is being done in your and my name. Everybody have a good night.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things.
I said to myself, how can that be possible?
You know, pistols and fondle slab of choice, and the internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from, as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because here's